Okay, today we're working on another ghost around. Many years ago, I think two, was one of the first ones I took apart. So, this is another one that was sent to me that is having some function issues. I have not opened the box, as you can see. And I don't quite remember what the problems were. We're going to find out together. And then we're going to see what it's going to take to fix it. Alright, step one. Take it out of the box. Got an adapter. That's good. There we go. Alright. Desiccant packs in there. Get the elastic strap. Alright. Well, there it is. Some of the foam out. This is one of their older models where it cam locks out. I actually like these. So let's plug it in and see what's going on. 4.5 volt at 1 amp or 1000 milliamps is what it'll say on most of them. Plugged in. Okay. Whoa. Well, that's no good. That sounds horrible. And unless I turn it by hand, nothing really happens. I don't know if you saw the lights flickering or not. And then, of course, you heard that horrible sound. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is actually putting out 4.5 volts. Yep. 4.89. Adapter is good. Well, voltage is good. Have to load test it for amperage. So I'm going to unplug the adapter and I'm going to move it out of the way. And now we're going to have a seat. Let's see what we can do. Now, the ghost around, you have to pull these little plastic pins to get underneath the deck. And I'm going to try one more thing, is I need this up. I don't want to force it to risk breaking the gear. I'm going to try and get it up using the power supply. So, as much as I hate to do it, I'm trying to get it to where it does its timing. The computer tells it to lift, and it's not going to do it. So, I'm going to do this the hard way. Last ghost around I had, it just some broken gears. This sounds a little more in depth. I'm using a small blade screwdriver to pull plastic pins out. Also allows using a small screwdriver to fit through the fence slats. Since I can't do it from above, since I can't get the hub to lift. There we go. There we go. Be a spot of sealant back here. And there's the spider web disc. And if you remember the last one, all the mechanism and computer board are right there. Of course, it's a lot easier with this up. So, let's see if I can get the top ring off and maybe take the whole thing off as one assembly. There are screws every 2 posts. So screw here, nothing here, screw here. Nothing, screw. So every 2 posts is a screw. Again, a long, thin screwdriver comes in handy. Yeah, that screw fell in. And then there's one on each side of the main mechanism, the pivot point. Which I guess would be the equivalent of every 2 posts. Those tweezers back. Try not to lose your screws. Like that. Just fell inside with the other one. We'll be able to get it once we get it apart. Did they really? Alright, each one of these is, except for this back one I believe, correct, is adhered to the disc I'm trying to separate. I can see there's stakes on them. I don't know if they're glued. So I'm going to try and pop them off. They are glued. So I'm going to have to glue it back on. Let's use a spudger. The glue they used appears to be a type of super glue or acrylic or acetate glue, I believe, because it's cracking, not stretching like hot glue would. They are staked, but they also put a dab of glue on them. Stake meaning there's a little plastic pin that sticks inside. Now, unfortunately, sometimes you can't get into these things without doing a little bit of damage. Try to keep it to a minimum. Oh wow, that one's really stuck on there. And this last one, which is like the one that was from many years ago, isn't attached except to the fencing, which is pretty common. So, take the disc off, pull out the pins, pull out all the screws, which those little screws that fell are right here. There's one. And there's the other one. So, normally what you lose is the hub, and you can just tip it up and take the screws out of the bottom to get to the hub. You don't have to dismantle it all the way. This is going to be dismantled all the way because we're definitely having an issue inside here because I can't lift this. We're not getting any power. Another big thing, you don't have to take it all apart. You need to know how to take it apart when you encounter a situation like this. Unfortunately for the uprights came apart. This one's not even glued on the bottom. That one is. Dab of glue, fix it right back up for you. Now I'm going to assume what's causing the power problem on this is going to be one of the two motors. This is a lift motor, and then your drum motor is up inside here. When a motor goes bad, it creates a really bad short on the system. It can actually overdrive or overpower what this board can put out. They're not fused. If this would have had a fuse as an example, it probably would have blown the fuse, but they don't fuse small electronics like this. Not like a little Walkman or CD Discman type thing. There's one have fuses. I'm just doing a visual examination of the board. I'm looking for any burn marks, discoloration. On top of the board, you have two capacitors and the blob chip, which is this right here. On the bottom of the board, you have all the small components. Looks like you got a couple of voltage regulators here, diodes, resistors, capacitors. You have a chip, which I can't read because the print's too small. It's probably a timing chip. Times when it goes up and down and the lights. That's usually what it's used for. I don't see anything obvious. I'm not using a magnifying glass, I'm just using my eyes. A lot of times on circuit boards you'll see a burn mark. It's scorched. So we'll do a process of elimination next. I'm going to first cut this little zip tie so I can have the wires independent from each other. Also allows me to flex the board a little more so I can read what it says here. This is a motor. And since I'm believing it's a motor, I'm going to start with the ones that say M. M usually stands for motor. So I am going to pull motor 2, motor 1. I'm going to pull motor 1 first. Nothing. Motor 2. Nothing. Okay, just push those back in. I'm actually wondering if it's got a bad circuit board. Okay, what's that? Power source. Speaker. So how this board is laid out, in case anybody takes it apart and forgets where things go. This one right here is your power, and it says power source, so you really can't, or power, you really can't screw that one up. M2, M1, M1 is the drum motor, M2 is this motor here. I'm sorry, backwards. Let's try that again. M1 is this motor, M2 is the drum. We have over here is your off-on volume switch, which has got the 5 wires. And then you have DY2, which DY2 I believe is the it's the micro switch. Tells it when to come back down, and also when it's in reset for when you turn it off, it drops back down. You have these 2 wires here, or 2 pins. You have a 3 and a 2, and they're labeled. I wish I could tell you what they're labeled. I believe it says K3 and K2. Unfortunately, the print is really bad on those 2. No, it's S1 and S2. There we go. So, S2 is the micro switch down here. S1 is the micro switch up here. And then the DY2, which I said was a micro switch, I'm sorry, that is actually lights. So, with the 2 motors unplugged, we're not getting any work. So, let's unplug the motors again. Unplug the speaker. No, actually, I'll leave that one plugged in case it starts making sound. Let's unplug the DY2. Look, we got sound. So, we might not have a bad motor, we might have a bad lighting circuit, which the lighting circuit is in this upper hub. So I'm going to plug the motors back in. It's a process of elimination, just in case it starts to work. No, we got Alright, now we got a motor functioning. So the lift motor is working just fine. Looks like our problem is going to be in this upper hub, because if I plug either one of these 2 hubs in, the speaker's making a whistling sound, which I don't know if the camera's picking up. It's kind of a high-pitched squeal. And that's a lot slower. Yeah, the problem that we're experiencing is in the upper hub. So if I disconnect the motor and I disconnect the lighting, she's working at full speed with sound, but when I hook the lighting back up, the lighting is really dim on the sides. It's not working at all in the center. And I know you're not supposed to do that, but that's how I need to get the hub to stay up. And I lose the sound, and it makes it really slow. So we have a problem in the hub. So it's just a process of elimination. The you can use a meter on them, but a lot of times if you unplug the component that's bad, it'll start functioning. But I believe this has a bad motor, or possibly the distribution board that's up in here has broke or shorted out, meaning that something has arced the contacts and it's creating a short internally. I believe the lift mechanism is working, so that is always a positive. And again, a long, thin screwdriver comes in handy. You can probably do this with it collapsed or in the down position by reaching through these slots, like I'm doing with the screwdriver. I've always done all of the merry-go-round types like this up. It usually makes it easier to work on, especially if you have to unscrew this, which is the housing that has the motor, wires, gears, etc. Anyhow, you take out the 4 screws that are not recessed inside little cutouts, which the cutouts, there's only 3 screws. Those 3 screws hold the planetary gears in place. Once you take those screws out, they'll start to separate. It's not going to come fully apart because of the hub. Because this is bigger than the bottom. But what I'm trying to do is see if I can see that circuitry, which is inside here. See what's going on. To access the motor, set those screws aside. There's 2 screws right here on this long black arm. Alright, I'm going to just try and take this bottom piece off to make life easy, or easier. There's either a glob of grease in here or one of the wires is pinched. I can't tell. Which sounds funny. You can't tell the difference, but I don't have enough viewing room. forget how you took it apart, take pictures along the way and just reference your pictures. Also try and keep your screws separated from your other screws. They're all different heads and different lengths and different diameters. But since I have this out, I'm going to quickly check the gears, make sure they're not fractured. Because one of my previous videos, everything was working fine. The gear was cracked. Kind of surprised. You can feel free to skip forward. Didn't anticipate this to take so long to take the screws out. The last screw that has the black housing is underneath this clear plastic. I was trying to come in at a slight angle, but it's not working. So I'm going to take this plastic disc off the bottom, which is 4 screws. Trying to do this without disassembling the whole thing, but it doesn't look like it's going to permit me to do so. There we go. That screw right there is under this piece of clear plastic. Hey, look at that. It's so much easier when you can actually get to things. There's the distribution board. There's one of them. There's another one up inside. There's just some glue. This powers this, which then powers this, and then powers the lights up inside the hub. This little board has 2 stakes and a dab of hot glue. Hot glue again is stretchy, which you can see is right here. It's a little hot glue. I'll get rid of that, and then there's a little more hot glue still on the stake. Right there. This one is the motor. And this one's the lights. So I'm going to do process of elimination. I'm going to just test the motor directly. Plug it in. That one's spinning because it's trying to reset itself, but it can't because this is a micro switch. Motor's plugged in. Yeah. I think we got the bad motor. Got some bad LEDs too. That other computer board's going out and I can't handle it. So I'm going to unplug this motor that's trying to reset. Make sure it's... Yeah, I think we got a bad motor. How I'm going to test it is I'm going to send power directly to it. Send 3 volts directly to the motor. Now I'm going to cheat on how I do it because I'm not going to sit around looking for my 2 pins. So I'm going to use the ends of some resistors and use them as pins to stick inside this plug. Now if the motor's shorted out, my meter should start beeping. That. Yes. Yes, motor is bad. So, bad motor. That's the first thing. Now, let's test the lights. I'm going to lower the power down to, I'll start at 2 volts. There is no resistor on the lights. Nope. Use this as an extension because these wires are very short. On the back here, there's a capacitor and one without a capacitor. The one with the capacitor is for the motor. It's noise suppression, so the motor doesn't cause flickering or static in the speaker. Flickering in the light, static in the speaker. So, lights are polarized, so I'm going to put the negative in the gray and the positive in the red. And I have lights, which I'll show you in just a second. Once I get the voltage where they're high enough. Hopefully you can see the lights. I can't see the camera, so I can't tell you. So it looks like all the problems, which is unfortunately very common, all the problems with this unit are caused by bad motor. And most of these, when a motor goes out, whether it be this specific piece or a animated house, not a ghost around or a roundup as an example, since they're very similar, it's a motor. And what happens is when the motor, I know I explained it, but when the motor shorts out, it's causing a excessive draw across the circuitry, and the circuitry doesn't know what to do because it's not fused. If it's fused, it just pop a fuse. So the blob chip, which is the brains, doesn't know what to do because it's got too much of a power consumption draw on one of its legs, And usually what happens is they just go dark. This went dark, but it was still intermittently doing its static, clicky, flickery lights, especially when you rotated the drum. And the reason being is that a shorted motor isn't turning. But when you start rotating it, you're allowing the current to drop because you're manually articulating the wheel, which then the circuitry has less load, so it tries to start working normally. But you're not spinning it as fast as it needs to be to remove all of its load. So I'm going to reassemble this hub so I don't lose or break anything. What I'm doing is I double check that it was centered up here, and it was all good before I torqued it down. Because if not, it won't spin. And that would be bad. Alright, so to get to the motor, take out these 4 flat topped screws. Which I'm also going to take the belt off, which has a lot of wear. Holy smokes. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but the belt has, it looks like hair because the belt's shredding. So we might have to replace that while we're in here, since you have to dismantle half of this thing to get to the drive belt. So, and we just lift up this section after we do it, and we're going to double check this gear. Yeah, this has gotten hot. It's discolored the grease. Grease is generally white. This grease is gray. Got some white, and then it's all gray. It's heat or wear. Actually, some of that could be the belt too. The material from the belt getting into it. I'm checking the 10-tooth gear. If you've worked on these or ever seen some other videos, that 10-tooth gear is really common for braking, unfortunately. It has a lot of stress on it, and it snaps. Take the motor out. It's these 2 little screws. Don't lose them. You can get those flathead pan screws at a hardware store. Those 2 screws are a lot harder to get. So this is our culprit. It's a little hobby motor. This one does have a part number on it. Give me a second, I'll read it to you. Need to get some X-ray specs on here and a little bit more light. There we go. The motor is an SRE-300CA, which is a very common hobby motor. The other part number on it is 11440-R/081016. You can find it by the it's SRF, I think I said SRE. The SRF-300CA. You'll find the motor that way. This is the same motor they use in Walkmans of the old days, Discman of the old days. It's a standard hobby motor. If you Google or Amazon or eBay search the SRF-300CA, you will find them. They're not overly expensive. Usually they have to be shipped in from out of the country, so it takes a little bit of time to get them. Usually, not always. And it will ask you the voltage that you need or want. It'll be like 3 volts, 6 volts, 9 volts. This thing runs at 4.5, so you want to get a 5 or 6 volt motor. You get a 9 volt motor, it won't spin as fast. You get a 3 volt motor, you're going to burn it up. So, just some helpful advice. Now I'm looking for my little pulley puller. No idea where I put it. So, I'm going to use a set of bent needle nose pliers and use them as a lever to pop off the pulley. So now I just need to find a motor. I'm sure I have some lying around. Matter of fact, this might be one right here in this contraption. Let's find out. Probably helps if I use the right screwdriver. So you saw my Grinch mobile. This is the mechanism from the free one I got that was a parts house, not a Grinch item. But this has the little hobby motor. I want to see if it's the same hobby motor. Take the belt off. Also going to have to pull the pulley. See, this pulley's smaller, right? Nope, same size. There we go. This is a 3-volt version. It's the same motor, but it says 3 volts. So this one wouldn't work in this house. It would burn up. But this is the 300P. Well, this one is the 300CA. So, I said it's a standard hobby motor. It just comes in different voltages. You just got to make sure you get the right one. So, give me a few moments. I'll be back. I'm going to go through my bucket of motors and find a new one. Alright, I'm back. Went through my motor pile. Found a few, but the armatures were too short. As you can see, this one has a black pulley versus the white. It's the same pulley, so I see no reason in changing it. Also found a new belt. It's a little bit thicker. It's not frayed like this one. So, put the belt on, give it power, voila! And this little motor is pulling 10 milliamps. And well, that's at 4.9 volts. Let's drop it down to what this thing actually pulls. It's about 7.07 versus 0.01. Or 0.1, sorry. So it's 0.07 with the correct voltage. Anyhow, now the motor doesn't have a connector on the end. There's a couple ways to do it. You can actually buy the little kit with the little fingers and do the connection and put it back in here if you want. It's a knurled finger connector, that's what it's called. And they make these little tools that pop them out for you. It's probably way more work than most people want to do, and even I don't do it unless I'm doing it on something like a car, or what I do for my day job, which is other electronics that require you to use the tool. This, because it's such a small connector, I don't have the replacement pins that crimp or solder on. So what I would normally do, and which I'm probably going to end up doing, is cutting the wire back a little bit, stripping it, soldering it, and reconnecting everything. This motor is bad, so we're definitely not keeping it for any reason. So I'm going to cut the connector off. It is important that you do black to black, red to red, because if you do the red to black, the motor is going to spin in the wrong direction. If you like that, that's fine. This motor doesn't care which way it spins, truthfully, but you might care on your actual item. So we're going to do this properly. I'm going to get out a piece of really small heat shrink. So we'll color match the wires. We'll get a little piece of black and a little piece of red. doesn't have to be this long. I mean, I don't need an 1.5 inch long piece of heat shrink. So cut them in half. This little motor here, if you're wondering, because it's not brand new, that's again why it's called the Random Junk Channel. The little motor, I believe, came out of a CD player. Because I have a lot of CD player motors in one drawer, and this is in the same drawer. I did have another motor that was specifically said it was a 4.5 volt motor, which also came out of a Walkman or Discman. The problem with it is the armature, the part that the pulley presses on, is too short. Because that would have worked perfectly as well, mainly because it told me the correct voltage. This one doesn't have a voltage on it. It has a part number of DM24268, and I just had to look it up and find out it's a 3 to 6 volt motor. So it will run below 3 volts, but it will have no power or no torque, so if you're trying to turn something specific, it won't work very well. So this motor probably just spun your disc, so the little laser eye can read your CD. And it's a variable speed motor because your CD changes speed as the little laser eyeball moves in and out. So anyway, more information you probably didn't care about or need to know. Okay. Alright, so solder. Blacks are soldered together. Let's get the reds soldered together. What I'm doing is I'm twisting the wires and wrapping them on top of each other. And then soldering the twists so they don't come off and make a good connection. I'm going to do this one slightly different than the other one. There we go. Go. Slide the heat shrink over. You can use a heat gun, which is what I was going to do. I don't really want all the noise, so I'm just going to use a lighter, a little quieter. Heat gun, lighter, heat pen, hair dryer. Rub your hands together really fast. That won't work, but sounds funny. There we go. There's the lighter. Huh, forgot I got a fan going. Gotta get out of the way of the fan. Fan. There we go. That's probably off camera, I don't know. Sorry. A little lighter. Fan's above the camera, so it's blowing everything down and putting my lighter out. Alright, when you reassemble this, you got the nose pin on this gear and this big pin. Make sure that you line them up in the respective holes. They should self-align, but everybody knows Murphy. Every once in a while, it doesn't. There we go. Like he wasn't doing just then, but then it just popped in. What I did to help it pop in is I just turned this gear back and forth, or the pulley, which turns the gear, which in turn allowed it to drop. The belt I'm using, the thicker belt, it actually came out of a Walkman or Discman as well. You can buy packages of belts online. You know, Amazon carries them. You can get them on eBay. I have purchased some of those before. The problem I have is I've never, so far, found any of the belts in the repair kits that are the size of the belts on Leakage. But when I take apart a Walkman, the belts are the same size. Kind of weird. I'm just taking the belt off so I can get the screws in. These screws are right underneath the belt. And I don't want to damage the belt. That was the clicking sound. Nothing's broke. The clicking sound was it slipping on my side cutters. Alright, let's put the belt on, reconnect the distribution board, and then test it out. I'm going to retuck the wires too so it doesn't touch any of the moving parts. There's a little channel on the side. Come on. There you go. I'm going to slide it over its stakes, like so, like so. It's not going to stay until I glue it, but it'll give me a little satisfaction to know that I didn't cut the wires too short. I should have told you to measure them, and it will ensure proper alignment of everything. So, power, plug it back in, make sure that motor is doing its thing. Problem with this is it's going to try and rotate probably as soon as I put it on. Just make sure that's off. It is. Nope, didn't. I'm surprised. Alright, hold it up. Uh-oh, not working. Okay. So, we got a slight problem. There we go. Plugged it into the wrong spot. Jeez, that's got some power. That's a torquey little motor. So, lights work. Where's my, plug the other motor back in. It's spinning. And then the lights are working like you're supposed to now. Which, probably hard to see. There we go. I don't know if you can see that. Little flashing green lights. Reason it's spinning, with it being off, is because the micro switch hasn't reset. That's why this house has a reset. This is why you're never supposed to just do this when it's running. It needs to reset. Some of them reset through the blob chip, some of them reset through a micro switch. The micro switch ones are less likely to get damaged. The blob chip ones that reset using the chip, which there are a couple, such as the booby traps and the mausoleum, which actually resets both ways, it can damage the chip. So you got to be really careful on those. Unfortunately, when you're repairing these, sometimes you don't have a choice. Most electronics are resilient when it comes to low voltage items. The chances of you actually damaging it are pretty slim, but there's always that chance. So, reassembly is just reversing everything I just did. You just do it backwards. I'm getting the hot glue gun out so we can glue that back down like it was supposed to be. And then we're going to reassemble this thing. You probably don't want to watch me reassemble it because you saw how long it took to take it apart. And I know the videos are long. I know some people have complained, but I try to make it so you can do it yourself and I don't miss too many steps. So I'm going to use hot glue to put this back on. Then I'm going to screw the cover on. After I screw the cover on, I'm going to put the pivot point on. After that's put on, I'm going to reattach it to the disc and then reattach the lift mechanism, put the circuit board back in, screw it all back together, glue on those, the uprights, put the that back on, and then give it a final test, which I'll come back for. Like I said, you probably don't want to watch me do this part. It's play the video backwards. Pretty much. So, I gotta wait for this to heat up, and I'll be back momentarily with a fully assembled, hopefully fully functional roundup. Jimmy, ghost around. I did a roundup in the last couple of months. That all of its failures was caused by this motor, and honestly, this is the motor that burns out first. I'm assuming it's because this lifts and pause, lifts and pause, lifts and pause, or lifts and lowers, with the pause in between. This spins constantly, never stops. And I'm assuming that is the reason why it fails, is because it's always turning, whether it's up or down. Also, it's actually got a lot of force on it. After this itty bitty little motor is turning this big old drum, and there's only 2 gears in here to transfer the energy. You have a lot of torque right here. Big mass, little motor. If it had a bigger gearbox like this one does, this thing has almost 5-6 gears, you could get a lot more torque, probably last longer, but you'd have a lot more space that you would have to take up to fit it all, and it would probably look like crap. It probably would not be pleasing to the eye. So that's my 2 cents on it. Hot glue gun's hot. But anyhow, put some glue on the stakes, help hold this thing back down. Let it cool down, reassemble. So we shall return after these brief interlude. All right. 15 minutes later, it's all back together. I put some super glue on the uprights so they'll stay. They don't move anymore. And moment of truth. Then, if we turn it, well, let it lift again, I'm going to turn it off. And now it does its reset, where it finishes its cycle with no sound. Once it pushes itself down, hits that micro switch, and it's done. So, this unit, shorted out motor, and which caused everything else to fail. Basically, that's the only thing wrong with it. Normally, it's not too difficult to get to them. You can sometimes do it without disassembling the whole thing, but it didn't quite work for me. So all that needed for parts was a new motor, a variable 3 to 9 volt standard hobby motor. Again, it's a 300 CA. I popped in a different manufacturer, they called it something different, and a new belt, because this belt is horribly frayed and it's at the end of its lifespan. Hasn't snapped yet, but doesn't look pretty. So hopefully you enjoyed. Similar to the first one, I believe, except the first one just didn't turn. I'm trying to do it from memory. We're talking about 2 years ago. This one had all sorts of issues that could have potentially burned out the circuit board if it was left on and nobody paid attention to it. So now I'll package it back up and send it back to its owner, where they can put it back into their display. Thanks for watching.